Hi, we're Nia and Marianne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon. Hello, Marianne.
Morning, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay. And we're going to talk about something that sort of helped me change my mind about the menopause. And the
Ooh,
menopause being very topical at the moment.
it is
Um,
indeed.
I've long done the menopause, and obviously you're gathering data about about how to do it. um,
Yep.
so Yep. And the menopause often is surrounded in our culture anyway by a lot of sort of messages of doom and gloom, how
It is
awful it's going
indeed.
to be. There's a lot more information about, obviously, and some people have done some incredible work around the menopause in the last sort of 10 years. So we are really having great conversations now, so much better than when
Yes.
I was doing this all that time ago.
Yeah, I think definitely we're having more conversations. I think more people are aware of the menopause now. I mean, it used to be quite a taboo subject, wasn't it? I
Exactly.
mean, women's
Yeah.
health in general was a
Yeah.
pretty taboo subject.
Yeah.
And I don't need to get on my high horse about how all medical studies are generated towards men because, I could go on about that.
No,
But
that's
there's
another podcast. Yeah.
yeah, they only really research women for one reason. Anyway, we do know more about the menopause. We know more about menopausal symptoms. There's much more awareness of how some
Yeah.
people do struggle during menopause, and hormone replacement. So HRT is making a big comeback as well, and we are going to
It
discuss
is.
that, aren't we, in a different
Yeah.
podcast because
Yeah. That's a
certainly
whole separate subject,
that's
really.
a whole
Yeah.
deep dive, yes, and I've
Yeah.
been looking into
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
we'll talk really about your experience, I suppose,
Yeah.
today, and
Yeah.
then how that might have been affected by what you learnt when you went through it yourself.
Exactly. I sort of
So
learned something interesting, I think, that helped me change my mind slightly.
so what were your expectations then? What did you think was going to happen? Because I think
Yes.
with a bit of
Well,
sort of
I think
anticipation,
I
you might have
was
been a bit, oh,
I would think I was a good candidate for, in many ways, for having an easy menopause
yeah,
because I was a bit all about doing stuff naturally at the time. So I wasn't
okay, yeah,
that interested in hormone replacement. More for me in some ways, as we learn later. But
yeah,
it was also about the time when a big study came out from the World Health Organization, and with dire warnings about the dangers of taking HRT and breast cancer
yes,
risks.
yeah,
And so actually wasn't terribly much of an option for me. But I
mm.
was looking forward to having to the end of cycles and all of that.
I think everybody's
Um,
looking forward to that, Marianne, I've got to be
yes,
honest.
exactly. Well, most people are anyway. Although there was
Yeah.
a little bit of me that did feel like the loss of fertility was a sort of marker and an
Mm.
and end of an era. But anyway,
I
um,
can't wait.
no,
I've
there you
got to
go.
be honest. I just think, oh no, I'm just
I think
ready for
I
that.
did sort of feel a little bit bereft by the thought that I was passing into the next era. Anyway,
Mm.
it didn't turn out quite as I'd expected, and that's why I got more interested.
Yeah.
Um, and a whole lot of women my age now were probably in the same boat that they didn't take HRT because of this paper, which turned out to be
Yeah.
not terribly well researched or interpreted.
No. So when
Also,
that came out, I remember there
yeah,
were huge warnings on
yeah.
HRT.
And people
The
just stopped their HRT in the
Yeah,
middle of
people
nowhere. Yeah.
yeah, they did. What was portrayed from that paper was a huge risk that you would
Mm.
either get breast cancer or other forms of cancer.
Yeah,
And therefore, that there was really no really good reason to put anyone on HRT because you were so much
exactly.
increasing that risk.
And I thought that it would be my fault if I got breast cancer. That's what came
Yeah.
across. If you take HRT and you get breast cancer, don't think we haven't warned you. That's the message I got.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Oh,
terrible.
yeah.
Okay.
And if you were gonna go on it, you were gonna go on it for the shortest period of time
Yeah.
possible,
Yeah.
and the lowest dose possible, and we weren't really gonna talk to
And
you
you were going to
about.
be frightened all the time you took it.
Yes, yeah, which is bizarre, really. So you're interestingly, I mean, yeah, I know I have relations who did take HRT during that time, and I'm not sure
Okay.
that their risks were explained to them in the same way, but that's a whole other.
Yes, whole other podcast.
Yeah.
And I also had, a lot of how you do life is to do with the role modeling you've had. So,
Mm,
I had a very successful mother postmenopausally, both professionally and personally, who didn't talk much about the menopause because I think we didn't. And
okay,
so
yeah.
I presumed that I'd pretty well sail through this time of life, really. That was my expectation. But it wasn't quite like that.
Okay. Okay, so do tell us, how was the, au natural way to do.
The problem with all of this, as you know, and we're going to talk a bit about something interesting that I read that really affected my mind, but the problem with all of this is sorting out exactly what factors do influence you because there's so many different factors you learn, both
Yes.
physiological, emotional, lifestyle. So it's very hard to say exactly why I got into trouble in my midlife. So I was going to be healthy forever. I took no interest in my own health because it was absolutely assured. I was dealing with a lot of unhealthy people, remember? So that's what happens to health professionals. They just think it'll never happen to them because they know better. But actually,
Yeah, and
life
also
catches
because
up
you're
with
not as bad as the people in front of you,
no,
are you?
life
So
catches up
therefore.
with all of us, exactly.
Yeah.
And looking back now, this whole natural thing, I would probably have a bit more of a balanced view about HRT and whether it would have been useful. But of course, the chance is long gone.
Yeah. I think the trouble is as well that you would never have known. The big problem with all of this is that you can say, "Oh, I could have considered different
Yeah,
way,"
no, of
but
course.
you never know
Yeah,
what your menopause would have been like had you done a different thing either. That's and you never know
absolutely.
what it will be like because you can think it's going to be
No.
one way, but then it's something else.
Yeah, no, exactly. When I was thinking about talking about this article I read, which sort of made me think much more about the options I had in how I responded to the menopause, is that there were a whole lot of other factors at the same time. So, what I would have said originally was this article made a huge difference to me, and maybe it did. But what I do
Mm.
know now is that at the same time I was making other modifications and improving my lifestyle in general for other reasons. And so all of this might have contributed. So we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that metabolic health is probably another hugely important pillar when it
Yeah.
comes to midlife and how you feel.
Mm.
So, the real story after this long preamble, I'm a bit of an armchair sociologist. And I love reading those sort of articles. I was doing really badly and I was looking at articles on the menopause, trying to find some nice, easy ways of making myself feel better. And I came across this article about menopause in Japan, where women seem to do an awful lot better. Remember, when you live within a culture, that's the cultural narrative you get, and you don't necessarily think there's any other way. It never occurred to me that the Western world might be suffering more from menopausal symptoms because of the way we lived. I mean, this was not even on my radar. I don't think actually I knew what metabolic health was at the time. All I knew was that I felt pretty bad. I was,
Mm.
sad, had no energy, started to sleep really badly. There were a whole lot of different symptoms. And we do know women in our society have some really quite debilitating symptoms, but others have almost none, which is pretty weird. And I always wanted to be and expected to be, by the way, in the nun group.
Mm.
And then I wasn't. When I read this article, I thought, I wonder if it's our sort of cultural attitude. And there is no doubt that this is true. So, our culture is all about youth, beauty, fitness, fertility.
You're not
No,
allowed to get old, are you?
exactly.
We don't
Yeah.
relish aging. We
No.
if you think about actresses in Hollywood, for example, which
Yeah.
and it's the same to a lesser extent in the UK than in America, but people just disappear. Like they don't get jobs after they turn 40. Um,
Yes.
there are
Yes.
some
Exactly.
amazing actresses, especially British actresses, that are
That have
bucking the
gone
trend of
on
that,
and
that have
on.
gone on, like Dame
Yeah.
Judi Dench and
So maybe
Maggie
we do
Smith.
better than some.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
certainly that aging is not revered like it is in other cultures.
No, so this is what I read, you see. This is what started to get me interested because I thought, so part of this is because of the way we see aging in our
Mm,
culture. And if I could change that round even in my own mind, that might help
yeah,
me because you've got to embrace aging, It's going to
we're all going to do
happen
it.
anyway. It's
Yeah,
it's completely ridiculous to say you're not going to age and fill yourself with all sorts of, trying not to age. So, I mean, these advantages aren't forever, by the way, because things change. Historically they've had fantastic diets, but this might not be forever because
no,
fast food is fast making its way. So I
yeah,
think it's a bit like the blue zones. We talk about the blue zones, but actually the blue zones are all changing. So yes, that's a
yeah.
whole nother interest. I also believe that Western medicine had pills for all ills, and we'll talk
Oh
about that in
yes,
another podcast. So,
oh
so
yes.
I was very cross that I felt bad and couldn't seem to make the pill bit work. Um, and remember, I worked as a pill person.
Yes,
you
oh
know,
yes. You
that
were
was my
giving out the
job.
pills.
Yeah.
Yes. So you couldn't do this, but as a culture, you're saying ultimately that our Western culture may therefore suffer from more
Mm,
debilitating symptoms than
mm,
other cultures.
exactly.
You can't change your culture.
No.
So, but if this is true, if it is the case that the culture of Japan is helping people menopause more effectively or with
Yeah.
less
Yeah.
symptoms and
Yeah.
interruptions to their daily life, how does it help people? Because
Yes.
we can all sit here
So
and go, well, that's lovely, Marianne, but we don't
yes.
live in Japan.
Exactly. So, how would it help you? I think the thing that I really enjoyed about reading this was I suddenly thought that your attitude towards aging and changes in middle life could affect how you responded to the changes that were happening to you in a way that I could either embrace aging and say actually losing my fertility and beginning the next bit of life has some pluses for me,
Yeah.
or I could revel in the fact that I was feeling terrible. And I don't, by the way, make light of the feeling terrible bit because there's some very real things I think that people feel in midlife. So let's never make light
Mm.
of it. But it did give me a little glimmer of hope that I might actually have more control about how I felt than I'd thought. So instead of just letting it happen to me, I started
Mm.
to think, so there might be a different way of looking at it. And that's what got me really interested.
Hmm.
And when did you last hear anybody extolling the virtues of the menopause in our culture?
Well,
I mean, did you ever? Did people say, isn't it great to finish having periods? Well, you will hear the odd person say that,
I
but
mean,
it's
I say that
pretty
because
unusual.
I
Yeah,
am
well,
unusual.
yeah,
Yeah.
you are, and I'm really pleased that you might have this option of thinking this is a good time, not a bad time. But what is it about the Japanese that make them have a better lifestyle?
Yeah. I mean, what do they do differently? I know you love the Japanese culture, but dressing up and dyeing your hair black is not going to
I've
change
always
your
wanted to be
menopause.
a bit Japanese, of course, because I love their design style, straight black hair, food, and the
Mm,
best of all, healthy longevity, by the way. But anyway,
yeah.
I wasn't Japanese, and when I read historically in this article that they didn't even have a name for the menopause, that fascinated me. I thought, imagine they do it with
Yeah.
such little ado that they don't even call it anything. In fact, they do have a name for it now. And they refer to this time of life as konenki. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it means
Kaninki.
renewal, basically,
Okay.
which I thought was such a lovely
That's a really
way
nice way to say it,
of
isn't it?
looking at
Renewal.
it. So
Yeah.
this is your renewal. This is your new life, right? And they do seem to have fewer symptoms,
Hmm.
and there's some interesting observations about what they do better. So one thing is that the elderly in Japan are much respected,
Mm.
and that older women are considered wise and sage. And I thought,
Oh
oh, I
no, does
really
that mean I
like
have to consider
that.
you wise and sage?
Yes, I really like that. Because you know what I've learned in life is if you consider yourself wise and sage, then other people might. If you
Ooh.
consider yourself to be disappeared, you might well have disappeared from others. So I think one's own sort of attitude is incredibly important. I don't really think about age, and I do feel like I have some pluses when it comes to where I am in life.
Mm.
Always. I mean, whatever
Mm.
you are in life, there's got to be pluses. They often work part time, even after their 70s. So there's a group of older people, and they work at their own sort of pace. But again,
Yeah.
the workplace makes space for them,
Yeah.
which is we
Whereas in our
don't.
culture, if you can't keep
Yeah.
up, you're out.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
They are metabolically healthier, which I would really not have understood then, but of course do now. And
Mm.
there's much less obesity in Japan even now. Percentage-wise, they've really bucked the trend of affluent societies, and this is partly, I think, to do with the amazingly traditionally healthy diet that they eat. So they eat a huge amount of fruit and veg. They also walk everywhere or bicycle. So I was reading
Mm.
about schools in Japan last night, how they feed kids incredibly
Ooh.
well, usually on-site
Yeah.
kitchens with incredibly fresh fruit and veg. But also, they're not allowed to use cars to drop off their children
Yes. Apparently, from the
because
age of 5, they're all walking to
and they
school.
walk on their own from the age of 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Incredible.
really interesting that they're much more active. They also eat a lot of soya products, and there's obviously some interest about soya and
Yes.
estrogens and protective stuff about
Yeah. So
hormonal
around
change.
the time that you were menopausing and there was all that furore about HRT and about the cancer risk, there was a massive impact of the soya products on the natural health pharmaceutical market. I know we've talked about supplements before, but there was a booming business in
Yeah,
menopausal supplements,
yeah.
and soya was
Do.
one of them. So, anyway, this got you thinking.
It's really got me thinking that I could take some control over this time. And I really loved the idea of positive aging. And again, I had an incredibly good role model because my mother was a fabulous champion ager. And so
Yes.
I was lucky. I could see myself fit and healthy and wise and sage, and I could ignore the whole declining tens of the Western world.
Yeah.
So we know about that, this huge anti-aging industry which promises you to turn back the clock. It's all absolute nonsense. Also, there was a lot of social stigma around talking about the menopause, which
Yeah.
we are getting much better at now, which is great. And then the other bit is that we tended to medicalize the menopause in the West. So we tend to want to manage symptoms, and we're going to talk about that in a different podcast about
We are.
the medical management of midlife, which is a whole nother thing. So hormone replacement therapy has got a really important place now in all of this. And there's no doubt people in the West do suffer often from debilitating symptoms.
Of
So let's not
course.
take that away from people. But what we do know now that I didn't really know then was that improving metabolic health really improves your symptom rate when it comes to the menopause.
Mm.
I did by chance, and nothing to do with the menopause, by the way. I did have other issues, and I had to start improving my
Changing.
lifestyle. So,
Mm.
what I can't tell you was whether this one article changed so much for me, because now I realize that there were so many other factors, and metabolic health improvements for me probably was another huge factor in making me feel better, which
Mm.
meant that I could then talk about attitudes and things, because when you feel terrible, you haven't got the capacity really. And if somebody said to you, well, you have to be more Japanese about this, you'd have probably
Punched him in
wanted
the
to
throat.
smack
Yeah.
them. Yeah. You probably would have. So I know that I've said this before. People have got very upset with me. But
Yeah.
what I'm not trying to say is that, you don't feel bad. What I'm trying to say is there are different ways of looking at midlife. And midlife is a great time to start taking some control
Yeah.
over your health because you're
I think
investing.
really it's important. Yeah, you're investing, but it's important
Yeah.
to you're not minimizing anybody's experience, you're not
No.
minimizing
Oh,
anybody's
no, no,
symptoms.
no.
However,
No.
you're saying that, look, there are people on the other side of the world who are doing this
Yeah.
differently to us and they're not suffering as much as us. So what is it that we can learn from them?
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
without taking away from any of what you're going through, what is it that we have not done, or what
Exactly.
could we change here that would make a difference for us and for future
Yeah.
generations? Because maybe that person's menopause won't be affected, but maybe their daughters will. So it's,
Exactly.
knowing this stuff now.
So you can't change the culture you live in. I mean, I'd love to go and live in Japan, but it's pretty late in the day for a change
It's a
of
bit, yeah.
geography.
I mean, you
Um,
can if you want to. We can still record podcasts, but we'll have to work out. I'm not getting up in the middle of the night for
Look,
you.
I don't think the Japanese authorities will look at my profile and be terribly interested in having me. So there's some lovely bits to it, and it did make me think, savor every bit of life. Aging's to be embraced. Do it really well because
Mm,
that's really within your power. Optimize your metabolic health at any stage of life because I promise you, increasing activity levels, using mindfulness techniques and behavior change, changing your diet, all those things, will help you feel better, which makes you navigate maybe your mindset better. So it was an interesting experience for me and I learned a lot. But it was the first time I realized that my health was actually in my hands and not
yes.
in the hands of Western medicine.
Mm,
Because although Western medicine does some fantastic things, and I'll never take away from that, but you do have to look after your own health. It isn't all fixable just by medicalizing it.
no, absolutely. And also, we can't just expect Western medicine to pick
No,
up the
there
pieces.
there
We
isn't, unfortunately, a pill for every ill, as we know. But the
No.
more we talk about these things, the more I hope people who listen will think there are some options that they can do something today
Mm,
about making themselves feel better. And we don't eat as well as we could. We're not as active. We're very stressed as a culture. So all those things are there
yeah.
for the taking. Look at our Kickstart course. We
There is
look
so
at
much
all
we
these
can do.
things.
I
Yeah,
think actually, instead of
exactly.
saying we
Yeah,
can make a blanket statement, there's a lot of things we don't do well, but there are so many small things we
yeah,
can change, and that
yeah.
they're
Today,
so, yeah, that are so easily graspable, actually, that there is
yeah,
a massive amount of hope in this. I
I
think a
agree.
lot of women think about menopause as, oh my goodness, it's going to be awful,
Yes,
and
exactly.
dread
Oh,
it.
and they feel awful. And the perimenopause is real. Feel not like themselves. But the fact is, you're in a bit of life that, as you know, you've got younger children, you've got older parents, you've got a big mortgage, you've got a living to earn.
Yeah.
All of those things feed into this time of life, which is
Yeah.
tricky about self care.
As I said
Making
to
the
my friend
time.
yesterday, adulting is harder than it was cracked up to be.
It absolutely
Yeah.
is. And I have to say that I sort of feel jealous of you in a way because I think you will be so much better prepared than I was. I think I just sailed into midlife thinking this will be a cinch because life's always been a cinch. But unfortunately, the way you live will catch up with even the best of us. And, I
Yeah.
think genetically I might have been handed quite a good hand of cards, which
Yeah.
is lucky for me. And I'm now reaping some of the benefits of changing my lifestyle in my mid 50s. And because I don't think I'd be where I am now if I hadn't taken some control.
Let's have some
Mm.
last words about menopause.
Right. Well, what can I say as a summary? I'm going to
Yes.
say you may not be able to change the culture you live in, But
Yeah.
the knowledge that the way we see things might not be the only way is an interesting one. And this may help you choose how to approach this time of life. Optimizing metabolic health, though, at any stage of life really increases your well being. And I think you particularly need to start paying attention to this, even
Mm.
if you've had a really good run and
Mm.
you've been lucky like me. So let's keep talking about all of this. I think this is the way, is to open and sow the seeds and open people's minds to the fact they can take so much more control of their destiny than they
Than
thought.
they thought. Yeah. And if you're a man listening to this and
Yeah,
you've got a woman who you
yeah,
need to support, then all of these changes do also apply to you.
yeah. Male midlife is very real too. It's just not quite as documented. Yes,
Optimizing metabolic health at this stage
exactly.
will
Yeah,
only provide benefits for the rest of their lives.
exactly.
Cool.
Lovely. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.